Hello, everybody. This is John Fenn with supernaturalhousechurch.org, and today talking more along the discipleship process, this time when angels or the Holy Spirit speak to you. My heart is just to share the things of the Father, and this is key, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and stuff out there. So I want to share this with you because I think you'll appreciate this. In the past couple of weeks, if you watched earlier, I talked about words like perceive, discern, witness, things of that, which are all internal. I talked about how Jesus in Luke 8:46 said, "Who touched me? I perceive power has gone out from me." How in Mark 2:8, he had perceived what some of those scribes were thinking when he told the man his sins were forgiven. Today, when I talk about angels and the Holy Spirit, I'm going to talk about the way the Holy Spirit himself speaks to us and angels. Now, the foundational verse is something that Jesus said in John 16:13. In John 16:13, actually in verse 12, Jesus said, "I've got a lot more things to share with you, but you can't even grasp them now. However, when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak of himself, but only what he hears, and he will show you things to come." See, the Holy Spirit only repeats what he receives of Jesus or of the Father and then communicates them to us. The Father is on his throne in heaven. The Holy Spirit is here working on the earth. To reject the Holy Spirit is to reject Jesus. The Holy Spirit is the one who communicates any vision, any word, any leading, any hunch, anything you perceive or discern, any communication you have from the Father is via the Holy Spirit. So even in seeing Jesus or seeing angels or hearing the Father's voice, etc., it's all going to be through the Holy Spirit. He's the one who's ministering to us today, if you will. And so there's a distinction that needs to be made from the internal, vague, nonverbal things. Jesus said the Holy Spirit will guide you into all truth. He will show you things to come. Both of those are nonverbal. One is visual, one is just he'll guide you. And the middle point is he will not speak of himself, but whatsoever he hears, that's what he will speak. That's John 16:13. And so that's why there's no prayers to the Holy Spirit in the New Testament, because Jesus said very clearly in John 16:23, pray to the Father. And that's why the only prayers in the New Testament are to the Father. Anyway, to get back, not to get off track. So let me give you some examples, and I'm going to say this about the Holy Spirit. When the Holy Spirit speaks, it is always very clear, it is always very precise, and frankly, it sounds like a loudspeaker in the brain. In fact, many people who have come to me who are inexperienced in hearing the voice of the Lord and voice of the Holy Spirit himself, maybe they're used to witness and discern and perceiving things, nonverbal things in their spirit, but when they hear the Holy Spirit himself, they will say things like, "I think I heard the audible voice of God," or "God spoke to me audibly." And when I quiz them about it, we determined that inevitably it is just the Holy Spirit speaking to them, and they are used to it. So that is how dominant it is. When the Holy Spirit speaks to you, it's like a loudspeaker on the inside of you. It's always clear, concise, there's nothing vague about it. Now some scriptural examples. In Acts 8:29, it says the Holy Spirit, in Acts 8:29, the Holy Spirit told Philip, "Go join yourself to this chariot." That was the Holy Spirit said to Philip, "Go join yourself to this chariot." It's short, concise, and to the point. In chapter 10, I'm reading some notes here. In chapter 10, verses 19 and 20, Peter had been up praying, and the Holy Spirit spoke to him. And it says, the Holy Spirit said, "Behold, 3 men are looking for you. Go with them, nothing doubting, for I have sent them." Now, again, this is not vague. This is not a witness. This is not something. This is specific instructions. That's what, when the Holy Spirit speaks, that's what it's like. It's very clear. It's very precise. In Acts 13:2, 5 men were meeting from various nations. There were 4 or 5 nations represented there. In those 5 men, they were fasting, praying, ministering to the Lord. And it says in Acts 13:2, the Holy Spirit said unto them, "Separate unto me Paul and Barnabas for the work whereunto I have called them." That would be somebody through a prophecy, or maybe 2 or 3 at once heard the same thing through the Holy Spirit. "Separate unto me Paul and Barnabas for the work where I've called them." The Holy Spirit is inside. In fact, in Agabus, with the prophet Agabus in Acts 21:11, Agabus has a prophecy for Paul. Now it's interesting, if you will go back to Acts chapter 20 and verse 22, Paul says, I'm going to Jerusalem and I really don't know what's going to happen to me there, except the Holy Spirit witnesses in every city where I go that troubles and affliction await me. Paul said, it's so vague. I know trouble is coming because the Holy Spirit witnesses that troubles are coming, but I don't know what is going to happen to me. That's in Acts chapter 20, verse 22, 23. So Paul doesn't know except trouble awaits. It's not until later in Acts 21:11 that the prophet Agabus comes up to him, ties his hands, and he says, this is what the Holy Spirit says. The man who owns this belt will be arrested by the Jews and turned over to the Romans. And so Agabus says, this is what the Holy Spirit said. So Agabus is not getting a witness in the Spirit of feeling something vague. Now here's where Christians make the mistake. They will say this. They will say, God told me. And unless they can say, I heard the Holy Spirit, unless they can say, I heard internally that loudspeaker, that specific and concise direction and instruction, then they are in error. Most of the time when people say, God told me, what they really mean is, I feel a witness, I've got a sense in my spirit, I've got a feeling, I'm discerning something, I'm perceiving something, and it's error to say God told me, because he didn't. All he did was bear witness with you. He's guiding you, he's showing you, but he's not speaking. So if you didn't hear words, if you didn't hear the Holy Spirit, then don't say God told me. You see, in John chapter 12, verses 28 through 30, Jesus said, Father, glorify your name. And it says, there came a voice out of heaven which said, I have both glorified it and I will glorify it again. And it says, some that stood by said, it thundered. Others said, an angel must have spoken to him. But Jesus said, this voice did not come for my sake, but for your sake. Now consider the three things. God the Father spoke out of the clear blue sky, and he said, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. But some said it thundered. Some heard something supernatural but didn't know it was the Father. They thought maybe an angel spoke to Jesus. But obviously the Gospel of John, the author of John, who had also been on the Transfiguration and heard the Father's voice, heard it accurately, as did Jesus. John heard it accurately, so he could describe it in John chapter 12, verses 28 through 30. So you've got some said it thundered, some said an angel must have spoken, and some, like the Apostle John, heard it accurately. This is such a good snapshot of where Christians are today and where people are today. God the Father can speak, but to some it's thunder. God the Father can speak through the Holy Spirit to you, or through a vague witness, or whatever the case is, and to others it's like, well, it's something supernatural. Was that an angel? What is that? And others will hear it accurately. Folks, it's Hebrews 5:14 that says, by reason of use. It says this in Hebrews 5:14, strong meat is for those who by reason of use have trained their senses to discern between good and evil. It's trial and error, folks. But I can tell you this, there's a difference between vague witness, discern, something you perceive, heaviness you feel in your spirit, or a lightness in your spirit, versus when the Holy Spirit speaks to you. That too is internal. In the New Testament, every time it says the Holy Spirit spoke, it was an internal thing. They heard clear and concise directions. Now, what about angels? In Acts chapter 8 and verse 26, an angel told Philip, go down, take the highway down by Gaza that goes into desert. And he went. In Acts chapter 10, verses 3 through 6, an angel appeared to the Roman centurion Cornelius, and he said, go and look for a man named Simon Peter, who's staying with a guy named Simon, whose profession is a tanner, and he lives by the seaside in Joppa. So when an angel speaks, and this is what's different, everything I've covered to now, the Holy Spirit speaking to you, that witness, things you perceive, things you discern, that's all internal. But when an angel speaks, it's always external. An angel's presence in the room feels like a person who's anointed by the Holy Spirit. An angel is always from the outside, and if you will think back, many of you listening have had experiences where you have detected somebody from like behind you or beside you or something like that has given you instruction. I'll give you an example. When I was 14 years old, I had a mini bike, and I had a helmet that went with that, and I was going to go riding and race a friend of mine and his go-kart. And I was debating whether to put on that helmet or not, and I heard a voice behind me say, go ahead and obey your mom and put on your helmet. And I took that almost as my own thought and said, I think I'll go ahead and obey my mom and put on my helmet. Well, I had a wreck, and that helmet saved my life. I had a friend in college who, we were talking about some of these things back when I was 19 years old. And I didn't even really, compared to what I know now, I knew nothing, but I knew a little bit. And I pondered some of the things that Bill had told me, a college roommate. And he said when he was a senior in high school, a group of his friends were going to go out and go for a party, and he put his hand on the door, and he heard a voice behind him say, "Don't go with them, there's going to be a wreck." And he obeyed, he pulled his hand back. See, that's an example of an angel. So angels give clear and concise instruction, but it's from the outside. It sounds like a person anointed by the Spirit. In fact, when an angel speaks, it's suggestive, and it's almost like a friend submitting a suggestion to you. And your guardian angel, you get to know his voice, and you'll get used to sometimes where they are in the room. They feel like a person anointed by the Spirit, and it comes from the outside. The Holy Spirit is inside. Everything we experience where it's discerning, perceiving, a witness on the inside, all that's inside. But angels, when they speak, they are from the outside. They are individuals just like you and I. They are messengers from the Lord, and they are given to us to communicate specific messages, like we read in Acts chapter 8 and Acts chapter 10, or like I mentioned in Acts 8 and 10. So if you go back and think about some of the experiences you've had where you've heard like a voice from the outside, that was your angel. Anyway, just hope this has been a blessing to you, these short little lessons. I hope they're a blessing. Visit supernaturalhousechurch.org. Lots of things there. All right, God bless. See you next week.